Throughout history, there have been people who have committed some of the most heinous crimes fathomable. For those crimes, they have been convicted and sentenced to death. Welcome to Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Dorothea Waddingham, aka Nurse Waddingham, was born in either 1899 or the year 1900. After leaving school, she worked in a factory for some time and then began working in an infirmary. While working at the infirmary, she picked up a lot of medical knowledge. Feeling comfortable within the field, she decided it was time to start passing as a nurse, even though she had not had any proper schooling. In the early 1920s, she married a man by the name of Thomas Leach, and within their 8-year marriage, they had 3 children, Edwin, Alan, and Mary. The same year they married, Dorothea was arrested and put on probation for stealing toothbrushes. During Dorothea's marriage to Thomas, she actually had at least one prison stint for obtaining money by fraud. Despite her crimes, Thomas stayed with Dorothea, but unfortunately, he died of throat cancer in 1933. Over the years, Dorothea had been convicted of fraud at least 5 times. She spent 3 months in prison on another occasion for taking an employee's watch to a pawn shop without her consent. After Thomas's death, Dorothea started a relationship with a new man by the name of Ronald Sullivan. Although they never married, they moved in together and had 2 children. They lived at 32 Devon Drive in Nottingham, and the couple ended up turning their home into a nursing home. County authorities recognized Dorothea as a real nurse, and the honorary secretary of the County Nursing Association is the one who approved Dorothea's work and actually arranged for her to receive a couple of patients for 30 shillings a week. Ronald and Dorothea agreed, and they welcomed 89-year-old widow Louisa Bagley and her 50-year-old daughter Ada. Louisa had been taking care of her disabled daughter, who was unable to walk due to her severe multiple sclerosis, but because she was getting older in age and was no longer able to properly care for Ada like she did in the past, she thought being in a nursing home would be the best for both of them. When Louisa and Ada became residents of the nursing home, there was only one other patient at the time named Mrs. Kemp. Mrs. Kemp ended up dying a few months later. Part of Mrs. Kemp's care involved her having to take large amounts of morphine. After her death, the surplus amount of morphine that was no longer needed was still in the home. Getting back to Ada and Louisa, Ada had a will, leaving her estate of a large sum in a trust for her mother in the event of her death. 2 of her cousins, Lawrence and Fred, would get everything else. That will was destroyed after being cared for by Dorothea, and a new will was made on May 4th after Ada summoned her solicitor, Mr. Lane. Ada told Mr. Lane that she wanted to give her savings to Dorothea and Ronald under the condition that they would look after her and Louisa for the rest of their lives. No one knows if Ada was threatened or convinced, but some speculate that Dorothea did threaten Ada and Louisa by telling them she would send them to a workhouse because she was not able to afford keeping them in the home. 8 days later, on May 12th, Louisa died of what was speculated to have been cardiovascular problems. Because of her age, no one suspected anything, and she was given a death certificate, which in turn allowed for her burial to take place. Even though her mother died, it's been documented that Ada was still living happily at the nursing home. 4 months had passed since her mother died, and it was now September 10th, 1935. On that particular day, Ada received a visit from a family friend by the name of Alice Briggs. Alice said that Ada was in such good spirits that she invited her to her home at a later date so they could have tea and socialize. Unfortunately, Ada did not make it to see another day. Ronald and Dorothea notified Ada's doctor that she had slipped into a coma. Dr. Mansfield made a trip to the home, and he confirmed that Ada was in fact dead. Dr. Mansfield concluded that Ada died from cardiovascular degeneration. Before Dr. Mansfield was able to fill out a death certificate, Dorothea showed him a letter from Ada that, unbeknownst to him, was actually written by Ronald. The letter stated that Ada wanted to be cremated after her death. The death certificate was issued, along with the certificate permitting her cremation. The 2 certificates, along with a letter from Ada that was written by Ronald and actually signed by Ada, was given to medical officer Dr. Cyril Banks. Dr. Banks was in charge of Ada's body, and he went over the letter. He also noticed that the sentence was cramped in and looked as if it was written in after the original letter was already finished. The letter was odd and raised many suspicions, so he reported the letter to the coroner, Wilford. Even though Dr. Mansfield ordered that Ada's body be cremated, Dr. Wilford ordered a post-mortem. Dr. Taylor and Dr. O'Donovan were in charge of the autopsy, and they sent some of Ada's organs in for a toxicology examination. The report concluded that Ada had high levels of morphine in her body. A second examination was conducted, and another doctor confirmed the high levels of morphine. With this newly discovered information, they decided it was best to exhume Ada's mother, Louisa. Louisa's body was exhumed on September 30th, and toxicology reports concluded that she had high levels of morphine in her body as well. Investigators were informed, and Dorothea and Ronald were soon arrested and charged with the murders of Ada and Louisa. During the investigation, Dorothea gave birth, so when she was arrested, she was nursing a newborn. Dorothea's trial began on February 24, 1936, and Justice Goddard was presiding over the case. On the second day of trial, Mr. Justice Goddard discharged Ronald due to lack of evidence, which left Dorothea to be tried by herself. Lead prosecutor Norman Burkett let the court know everything they discovered with the morphine, and he also brought in Alice Briggs and Dr. Mansfield to testify against Dorothea. Dorothea's attorney, Mr. J. Ills, suggested that it was actually Dr. Mansfield that gave Ada morphine tablets because of her pain, but Dr. Mansfield was there to dispute those claims. Dorothea took to the stand as well, and she described Ada's last couple of days on Earth. She claimed that Ada was not happy like Alice had testified. She was depressed and in a great deal of pain, so within 2 days she had given Ada 10 tablets, and she claimed that Ada ate a large lunch and seemed fine. She also admitted in court that she threw away the medicine bottles Ada had used before her death. Dorothea's trial lasted all but 3 days, and at the conclusion of trial, a jury unanimously found Dorothea guilty. Although they found her guilty, they knew it was a case that was eligible for the death penalty, so they recommended that Dorothea be given mercy. Despite the jury's wishes, Justice Goddard sentenced Dorothea to death. The prison in Nottingham used to carry out executions, but they stopped in 1928, so Dorothea was transferred to Winson Green Prison in Birmingham, where they actually carried out executions. A couple of months after Dorothea was sentenced, there was a reprieve hearing in the Court of Criminal Appeals in London. Court officials were present, but Dorothea was not present. Her appeal was denied on March 30th, and her execution date was set for Thursday, April 16, 1963. On the day of execution, Thomas Pierpoint and his nephew Albert Pierpoint were in charge of carrying out Dorothea's execution. Around 2,000 people gathered outside of Winson Green Prison to protest Dorothea's execution, but around 500 police were there to keep everything and everyone in line. Some of the protesters had loudspeakers, and they would shout things like, "Prevent the hanging of a mother," or "Stop the terrible crime of hanging the mother of 5 children." At 9 a.m. on the dot, Thomas entered Dorothea's cell, and his nephew Albert strapped Dorothea's legs. By 9:01, she was hanged. Thomas and Albert returned an hour later at 10 o'clock to remove her body. Dorothea was buried on the prison grounds. This execution made history because Dorothea was the only female executed at Winson Green Prison. It was also Thomas Pierpoint's last execution and Albert Pierpoint's first. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Death Row Executions. If you did enjoy this video, please give the video a like for me.